Hey, what's up, people? Welcome to my review and in-depth analysis of Todd Phillips's film, The Joker. And I just want to say right away that The Joker is one of the greatest comic book films of all time. Why is that? Because it's not a comic book movie. And I love that. I love that this film takes almost something like a art house approach. And it's a character driven film. It's a small film. It's not about CGI action sequences and all that stuff that we see in the MCU. This is a character driven film, and I love that. Those are the kind of comic book movies that I enjoy. I'm not the biggest fan of the MCU and all these epic CGI action sequences that go on and on. I'm not a big fan of Zack Snyder's DC films because all that CGI action is boring. I don't care. It's like watching somebody else play a video game. When I watch a movie, I want to connect on an emotional level with the characters. Just because it's a comic book property doesn't mean that you don't do that. And I know MCU, they do a little bit better of a job at this than, let's say, DC, but it's still not enough for me. I really care more about characters. And all the CGI action thrown at me is totally boring. I could care less. It's not impressive to me in the slightest. In fact, rather than giving me all this over-the-top CGI, seeing all these characters jump around like Saturday morning cartoons, having epic battles in the sky, and seeing another major city in America almost get burned to the ground through some kind of Armageddon, is boring. I would much rather see a simple action sequence with involving maybe some martial arts and real practical effects. Something like the Dark Knight trilogy. But I'm getting sidetracked. Let's talk about the Joker. So the Joker has so many themes that resonate with me. And it's hard for me to just group all these themes together in an introduction. So I'm just gonna go off and talk about what I love about this movie. But before I do that, I do have one criticism. So there's one thing that I don't like about this movie, and it's the depiction of Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's father. This is what I don't like about this movie. It's probably the only thing I don't like. And I really don't like how they made Thomas Wayne into an asshole, right? It just feels like it lacks any kind of subtlety, the way that his character is depicted. Like, I know he's supposed to be this asshole, but the way that it's executed, it lacks nuance. And it just comes across as generic and absurd. Now, one thing that I love about this film is how it captured the zeitgeist of the time when it was released. And this is an apolitical review, but we cannot deny that there was a lot of tension as far as politics and the way the president at the time, Donald Trump, was being perceived by many people in this country, half the people in this country, right? And that's all I'm going to say about that. Why do I bring it up? I'm bringing it up because, you know what? I feel like there was this projection to kind of depict Thomas Wayne as kind of like this Donald Trump character. And I say that not as a Trump supporter or I'm against him. I'm saying this objectively. And I feel like, okay, if you're going to do that, you got to be nuanced about it. You got to give me some, you have to put detail into this character and not just have him come across as like a guy that's just an asshole because that's the way he's supposed to be written. Because that's how it came across. And what really leads me to this conclusion as far as this character is just when Thomas Wayne says, basically, he literally says, like, for those that haven't been successful like me, you guys are clowns. That's what he says, and that's what gets all these people pissed off at him and try to, protest him and all this stuff. And I feel like for a politician to say that and to say it in such a shallow-minded way, it's just absurd. I feel like Thomas Wayne is supposed to be like, I think he's like campaigning and running for office, and he says this, and it's like the stupidest thing you could possibly say if you want to be elected for any kind of seat in government. And he says it, and it's just like, really? The writing there could have been executed a lot better as far as like him doing something to get people pissed off at him. It's like, I don't know, man. Again, it lacked nuance, and I feel like it was just executed in such a way that it just came across as forced. Like, oh, you're supposed to not like this guy, so we're going to have him say the most stupidest thing imaginable in order to get that point across. And I just felt like when he said that, like, oh, those people that aren't successful like me, they're just clowns. And I was like, nah, come on, man. You could have done that a lot better. And I get what they were trying to do because they want, all these protesters to wear the clown mask and all that stuff. But I don't know. I digress. But that I didn't like. I don't like, and even if they didn't do that, let's just say, for instance, that Thomas Wayne's character didn't say that exact thing, that everything was fine, like as far as that aspect in the story, but he's still supposed to be this unlikable character, right? I don't like that. It's like, why did you make Thomas Wayne into this asshole? It makes his death and the death of his wife, I don't feel empathy. And I don't like that. That's something that you're supposed to feel empathy for. When Bruce Wayne's parents die, you're supposed to feel empathy for Bruce Wayne. Now, when they die at the end of this movie, that's exactly how I felt. I didn't feel empathy, right? Now, not to contradict myself, but we can totally put this outlook, just flip it up on its head, because it's inferred that at the end of this film, none of this stuff even happened, right? That it was all in the Joker's head. He imagined the whole thing, right? So, I don't know. Am I wasting my time even talking about this negative criticism? Because Thomas Wayne may not even have been like that. He may not have been this big asshole politician, because the whole movie may have not even occurred. It may have all been in the Joker's head. But I digress. Point being, that's the only thing I didn't like about the film. So for the rest of this review, I'm just going to shower this movie with infinite praise, basically, because I love this movie. Now, again, I love how this is a character-driven film. It almost feels like it's taking this art house-like approach. I love that it's a small film. It's not about the Joker trying to take over the world and basically blow up Gotham, right? I love that. I love that, because that stuff's boring, right? And I really enjoy how the Joker tries to be this comedian in this film. And that's totally taken from the graphic novel written by Alan Moore, The Killing Joke. So that's the Joker's origin in there. And I love how they take that. They borrow that from The Killing Joke. But pretty much the rest of the film is original. And, I don't have any problem with that, as long as it's artistic and long as it's executed good, right? So I also like how they gave the Joker a laughing disorder, right? And I thought that was a nice, unique detail given to the character. I thought that was amazing. And do I really have to get into how great Joaquin Phoenix was in his performance? He was outstanding. I mean, I could go on forever, but I'm just going to say he was outstanding. This is one of the greatest depictions of the Joker ever. I mean, we are so fortunate. I'm so fortunate as a Batman fan to have such great performances, to have such great movies. I love Batman. For me, I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm biased as hell. Batman is the greatest comic book character of all time to me, probably next to the X-Men, and that's just me. I love most of the Batman movies. I feel so fortunate to have, for the most part, great Batman movies. Really. And the Joker is no exception. It's so hard to pick a favorite. I can't pick a favorite. I can't say who's the better Joker. I love Jack Nicholson. I love Heath Ledger. And now I love Joaquin Phoenix. And I love Mark Hamill's voice work as the animated version of the Joker from the classic animated series. And again, as a Batman fan, I feel blessed, man. And Joaquin Phoenix was amazing. You could tell that he put so much of his heart and soul into this performance. And it is evident. And he deserves all the awards and all the praise. And again, what can be said about this guy's amazing performance that hasn't already been said? But I'm going to move on because I can go on forever about how great he is. But what I really love about this film are the themes. And to me, the themes of this film really touch upon society, our society in America. And I really love this. And I kind of like to keep my life private on these YouTube channels, but just a little detail about me is that I work in the field of mental health. I have 3 degrees, and this film really resonated with me because of that. And I really felt that this film was absolutely necessary to address the ongoing epidemic in regards to mental health and how it's just a crisis. How there's understaffing, there's lack of compassion from society for mental health in this country. And this film absolutely hits the nail on the head when it comes to this stuff. It was great. Every second of it. I love how the social worker's indifference is depicted in this film. And he literally you could, in the one scene where the Joker says, "You never listen to me. I come in here and you never listen to me." And then she finally says, "They don't give a fuck about you and they don't give a fuck about me." And I'm going to tell you, that is true. They don't care. In American society, they don't care about social workers. They don't care about teachers. The most important people in this country, some of the most important people in this country, get overlooked by our society. They get paid shit. Teachers get paid shit. And yet they are responsible for our children's future, our country's future. Social workers, they get paid shit. And yet they're supposed to help aid with this growing epidemic for the mental illness in this country. But we see all this crazy stuff. We see shootings, mass shootings, school shootings, and yet and it's like we don't throw money at the solution. Instead, we bitch and complain and get all political about what's the solution. And whenever there's a tragedy, what's the first thing that happens? People use that tragedy in order to try to move forward their own political agendas, right? But they never talk about solutions pertaining to mental health, increasing funding for more mental health. Man, let me tell you, a lot of these people in the field of social work, they get paid barely minimum wage, man. So we'll touch more on that later because it's just inevitable, because this film really touches on this stuff, right? And again, I love that dynamic between the social worker and the Joker in this film. You could totally see her indifference. And it's not an indifference because of a lack of compassion. It's because the system doesn't care. And what does she tell the Joker? She tells the Joker they cut the funding. And that's a reality. It happens all the time. They cut the funding and I can no longer help you. And what happens? He can't get his medication. And what happens? He finally snaps at the end and actually like murders somebody. But this time in he just does it because he snaps, right? The previous murders of the guys on the train, the Wall Street guys, whatever, that was in self-defense for the most part. Yeah, he went overboard, but they messed with him. But when he snaps on that dude that basically gave him the gun in front of the small guy, man, that was him losing it because he's not taking his meds, right? And a lot of stuff because of what he finds out, what happened with his mother abusing him and things like that. But as this review continues, we're going to talk a lot about mental health and how I love how this movie touches on these themes, right? So another thing is that there's also this theme that's been present in this film. It's been present in the Batman 2022, and it was also present in The Dark Knight Rises. And I'm talking about this animosity towards the rich, right? It's very prevalent in this film. And what I love about how it's depicted in this film is that the Joker doesn't care. He does not care about that. All this animosity from these protesters against the rich and all that stuff, it's happening in the background of this movie, right? It's almost like Gotham. Whatever's going on in Gotham is its own character. It's like Gotham is a separate character. It's like a character in this movie, right? And it's going on in the background, and the Joker doesn't care. He even says on the show with Robert De Niro, he says, man, I don't believe in any of that stuff. I don't believe in anything. I love it when he says that. I love it when he says that because it shows, it illustrates how certain individuals in our society will exploit something terrible in order to try to further their own personal agendas. So what happened was, the Joker, in self-defense, and yeah, he goes a little overboard, right? Absolutely. When those Wall Street guys push him around and he shoots them, right? And what happens? A couple of people in society, they use that incident in order to basically push their own agendas. You got the protesters, right? Who are kind of like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and even the other side, the Q movement or the January 6th protesters, whatever. And then Thomas Wayne says something stupid, and it just shows how divided our society is, how divided Gotham is, right? It's all a mirror, it's a reflection, right? But then right smack in the center of all this chaos and all this division and all this social unrest is the Joker, who could care less. And I love that. I love that. Another thing that I like about how this film illustrates this animosity towards the rich is that you don't see this in the MCU. Everybody just loves and kisses Iron Man's ass, this billionaire, and they just glorify his wealth. And I love how these Batman films show the disparity between the classes. And this isn't seen in the MCU. And I'm not here to knock the MCU or Iron Man. Clearly, I'm biased because I love Batman. But with that being said, just really quick, I think Iron Man 1 is also one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. Maybe one day I'll review it, but don't go thinking that I'm just here to just take a dump on the MCU. I'm just clearly contrasting what I like and don't like, right? And I love how the Batman films aren't afraid to touch upon societal issues. Another thing that I love about this movie is the Joker's diary and some of the thoughts that he puts down. Some of these thoughts that he writes are very prolific in my opinion, and they resonate with me. And it really makes me kind of makes me self-reflect, because essentially I'm empathizing with a villain here. I'm empathizing with one of the most evil villains in the history of comic book characters, right? And I really feel like that is a reflection of our society. And another thing that I love about this movie, it really it's kind of disturbing, right? Because essentially we are empathizing with the Joker, right? And the Joker clearly has this mental illness, and it's clearly a part of a larger problem that is going on in society. And these are just some challenging questions that I ask myself as I watch this movie. And for me, if a movie can do that, that clearly illustrates that it is going above and beyond. Especially this kind of movie. This is going above and beyond in trying to just simply be a comic book movie. This film is really trying to ask some serious questions. And as I watch this film, I can totally see how the writers and the director drew a lot of inspiration from Martin Scorsese's film Taxi Driver, which was a film that also touched upon the zeitgeist of the time, which was the 1970s, and it also touched upon male loneliness, right? And in that film, it touched upon the zeitgeist of the 1970s, the racial tension that was going down in New York, and the politics, and again the male loneliness and how sleazy things were back then. The arrival of pornography in the cinemas, and I really see a lot of inspiration drawn from that film for this movie. And that film is one of my favorite films of all time, Taxi Driver. So for Todd Phillips to draw inspiration from that film, hey, that can only bring a smile to my face. Now, I really thought it was telling how the Joker tells his social worker that he felt better when he was locked up. To me, that is just like, wow, you know. And a lot of people with mental health issues feel that way. I've seen people in my field with mental health issues, and you know, this field is always encouraging self-advocacy and encouraging growth as far as independence. They want them to grow independently. And, you know, some of them do and some of them don't. And it's really ridiculous at times how you can clearly see that a certain individual with a mental health issue needs help. They need help. They cannot do it alone. Yet at the same time, the field that I'm in pushes for independence nonetheless. And anybody with half a brain can see that this is going to end up in disaster. And you know, it's not the client's fault, the person with the mental health issues fault, because clearly they have a mental health issue. But the way the system's set up, it's like, oh, be independent, be equal, be like a quote unquote normal person. But they can't. They can't. And I love how this film touches upon that. And it does more so even later in the film. And we're definitely going to go into that. You know, and it was also very interesting to see how the Joker requests for the increase of his medications. And he's currently taking 7 different medications. And he just doesn't want to feel bad anymore, right? And he basically, essentially, is trying to run away from himself, right? And a lot of the times, that's why individuals use drugs. They self-medicate because they're not comfortable in their own skin. And I can empathize with that, right? You can't just say, stop taking drugs, because it's about how they feel. It's like they're their own worst enemy. They're trying to run away from themselves. They can't live with themselves. They're not comfortable in their own skin. And this is clearly depicted here with the Joker. And there's another theme that I love that's in this movie, and that's the theme of fatherlessness, the issues of fatherlessness within the household. And we see this with how the Joker basically wants Thomas Wayne to be his father. And it's also seen in this relationship or this fantasy of Robert De Niro, who's basically the television host of the late night show, how the Joker fantasizes about almost like this acceptance between De Niro and the Joker, how he wants to be hugged by this guy. He wants to be, accepted by this guy. And to me, it's like this lack of fatherlessness, because we clearly see that the Joker has no father. He lives with his mother. There's no father in the household. So he's projecting or fantasizing about having a father, whether it's in him wanting Thomas Wayne to be his dad, or this fantasy of having Robert De Niro's character be a father-like figure. And I really think that's a major issue that's going on in our society. Again, the issues of fatherlessness and how this really, it could be detrimental to an individual's growth, right? Another thing that I see in this film is claustrophobia. It's like Gotham, as depicted in this film, has this claustrophobic vibe to it. And, you know, it's really well executed with the directing. Thomas Phillips' directing is outstanding. The cinematography is beautiful. And another thing that really contributes to this claustrophobic atmosphere is the music. The music, it really generates this sense of gloom and this unimpending doom and this unimpending breaking of this character's psychology and basically just giving into madness, right? It really does a good job at capturing that mood and tone for the film. And yes, there's this sense of claustrophobia in Gotham City, whether it's the excessive amount of people, the filthiness of the streets, the way that the shots are composited. I really feel almost claustrophobic as I watch this movie, more so than any other depiction of Gotham within the Batman film series, right? And I love how, coming back again to the Joker's diary, how he writes down the worst part about having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't. Oh man, that right there knocks my sentiments out of the park. As somebody that works in this field, yes. I mean, I have huge criticisms for this field and how the clinicians and all the people who want to help, their approach, right? I really think they're out of touch with reality. And that saying right there that the Joker jotted down in his diary echoes my sentiments exactly. We want to pretend that people with mental health issues can be normal and all that. And you know, there is a great part of individuals with mental disabilities that can function in our society. I'm not saying that they can't. They absolutely can. They have jobs, they go to school, and they pay their rent on time. Absolutely. But guess what? There's another large portion of that demographic that struggles. And we can't just act like they don't have a mental illness, right? We can't expect them to, quote unquote, be normal because they're not. And a lot of times, it feels like we are taking this approach out of political correctness or whatever. But let me tell you, right, just a really quick personal anecdote. I was giving Christmas presents out to clients, right? And there was a Christmas present that I didn't buy, but it was given to me to give to clients, right? And it was a sweater that said, "Normal is overrated." Right. And my point is, I really didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. I'm going to give this guy a sweater. I'm going to give this guy with a mental disability a sweater that says normal is overrated, which infers that he should be happy with who he is, accept his mental disability, which to a large degree I agree with. But you got to remember, man, that this mental disability that this person has is a hardship for this person. It's not like, oh yeah, normal's overrated, I'm gonna accept my disability with pride. Like, dude, this is a lifelong struggle that they're gonna have for the rest of their lives. A lot of these people will never have a significant other. They'll never have an intimate relationship because they don't know how to. Don't sit here and try to tell this person normal is overrated, because I'm pretty sure there is a big portion of this demographic that wish they could be normal so they can have intimate relationships, meaningful social interactions. So when the Joker wrote down the worst part about having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't, man, I echo that sentiment exactly. And I see it day to day, right? Now, society tries to normalize mental illness, right? It tries to normalize it. And I think that we see the detrimental repercussions of that on the news almost on a daily basis, right? And I think it's really sad. And in this film, it tries to it depicts that in this film. There's no facilities to aid with these individuals with mental health in our society. A lot of those things got shut down in the 80s for political reasons, which I'm not going to get into because we could go on and on about that forever, and I'm not trying to get into any partisan crap nonsense right now, right? But that's the reality. Society tries to normalize mental illness, and there is going to be some serious repercussions because of that. Now, let's get back to Thomas Wayne. As I said in the introduction to this review, it's probably the one thing that I don't like about this movie, especially when he says the dumbest thing ever that a politician could possibly say who's up for a re-election or trying to campaign for re-election. And he says, those who made something of our lives look at those who haven't as nothing but clowns. Like, dude, bro, you're insulting voters, man. Yeah, to me, that line was just stupid. I don't like it at all. I think, again, it lacks nuance. I don't think anybody in their right mind would ever say that. I don't think Thomas Wayne would ever say that. Yet alone, let's forget about the film, whether this is all just a fantasy in the Joker's head or not. Let's forget about the film trying to make Thomas Wayne into the bad guy. Him saying that is just so stupid. He could have said something else to piss the people off, right? But I digress. I've talked about that enough. And it just kind of makes him a weak villain, in my opinion. Now, when we find out that the Joker's little intimate relationship with his neighbor is a total fantasy, it really makes me want to review this film with a different set of eyes, right? Because now we know that it was all just a fantasy in his head. And I thought that was really interesting. And then when we get to the end of the film, and it kind of infers when he's at Arkham Asylum that the whole movie may be a fantasy. When he kind of laughs in his head at this image of Bruce Wayne's parents dying because of all the chaos that he created when he killed Robert De Niro's character on the TV show. And then he laughs to himself, and then the social worker or the whatever, clinician, doctor, whoever she is, ask him what's so funny, and he says, you wouldn't get it. I mean, for me, it's like, was this whole movie just a fantasy in the Joker's head? Maybe yes, maybe no. You know, I really love the ambiguity of that. I love it when movies make me ask questions, right? And when movies make me reflect. I love that, right? And another thing about this film that I really feel was not well received by the media was the fact that this film is a critique about how the media lies and how the media preys off people's misfortune. So I have never in my life been bag searched prior to a movie until I came to this movie. I don't know if you remember, but when this movie initially came out, there was this hysteria in the despicable, wicked media that this film was going to cause mass shootings or some ridiculous nonsense, right? And article after article came out. They were wishing, they were praying that something terrible would happen. I really believe that people in the media were praying that some kind of mass shooting at a theater was going to happen because of this film, right? They were praying that something awful would happen just so they could get clicks, just so they could increase their revenue and viewership, because that's what the media loves, right? They love misfortune. They love negative news stories because those get the most clicks, right? And I feel like the media really went after this film, even when the film was released, the reviews weren't glowing positive, right? I think it was 50-50. A lot of people in the media hated this movie. And my opinion is that they hated this movie because ultimately this film was a critique of them. This film loves it when an individual with a mental illness goes nuts, because then they get the clicks, they get to publish all the ridiculous news stories, and then everybody can go to work as far as pushing their agendas. So that's why I think this film was hated by the media, because it was a critique of the media, right? And before I went to see this movie, man, they searched me, man, my bag. They searched me to see if I had guns, weapons, all that stuff, man. And I think only 4 people die in this movie. And you could go see any other movie, man. You could go see Rambo 4, and that dude kills 200 people. You could go see Kill Bill 1, and she slaughters the crazy 88s in that movie. You could go see all these movies, right, with all this killing and all this murder, all these action movies and horror movies. Oh, but the Joker, we got to search your bag. Why? Because the media says that there's a potential threat here. It's really, really, really disturbing how the media went after this movie. It's despicable, it's disgusting, and I love how this movie basically gives the media the middle finger, man. Even though it's wrong what the Joker does when he basically blows Robert De Niro's head off, just on an ethical, moral level. But what he says prior to blowing Robert De Niro, the TV show host's head off, man, what's he say? He says to Robert De Niro, he says, "You got me on here just to make fun of me," right? And then what's he say before he shoots him? He says, "This is what you get." Something, I'm paraphrasing here, but this is what you get for laughing at people with disabilities, or mental illness or something, right? And to me, that's it, man. And that's what the media does, man. They make fun of people. They want to laugh at you. They want to print negative stories about you. The media is 98% negative, right? You don't see positive stories. Very rare do you see positive stories on the news. It's mostly negative because the negative stuff gets clicks. The negative stuff increases viewership. So that's my point. The media hated this film because it criticizes them, right? So the funny thing, and this is also prevalent in the Batman 2022 and in the Dark Knight Rises, is that this whole anti-rich sentiment in this film, it's the quote-unquote kill the rich movement. The irony here is that Bruce Wayne and Thomas Wayne even says so. He's the only hope for this city, right? Thomas Wayne says that him getting elected, or just him putting his wealth into the city to create jobs and to create social welfare programs, things like that, he's the only hope for these people. He's the only hope for the city, and I thought that was very ironic, and it's just a very it's kind of a observation that makes me reflect, right, on society, on the real thing, right, in the real world. But at the same time, when he says that, it also reinforces my dislike of him saying that ridiculous stuff about, if you haven't succeeded like me, then you're nothing but a clown. It's like, well, dude, if you really are the only hope for the city, and you really are running for re-election or to be elected, whatever you're running, why would you say that in the first place? Again, the one part about this movie I don't like, right? Now we come to a very important part in this film, and another theme that I feel is very important and overlooked in our society, highly overlooked in our society, and that's the theme of being a victim of childhood abuse. So the Joker finds out that his mother abused him, right? And this whole time you see how much he loves his mother. And, he's under this delusion that his mom had an affair with Thomas Wayne, and that Thomas Wayne is essentially his father. But he finds out that his mother abused him and ultimately kills her. And you see how he deals with that, right? You see how it essentially is what makes him, that in the absence of his medication, it's what drives him into this state of madness that he will never recover from, right? And that's another thing that is overlooked in our society, the impacts of childhood abuse. And as much as horrible as childhood abuse is, I really appreciate that this is in this movie because it provokes discussion, and I think it's really important. And this is such a heavy movie, right? It really is. I love this movie. It's such a heavy movie. This is one of the best Batman films or Batman related films or Batman related properties ever made. I cannot praise this film enough, right? And ultimately, when he finds out that he's a victim of child abuse from his own mother, he says, "I used to think my life was a tragedy, but now I see it's a comedy." And then he kills his mother, right? And then this is the point of no return right here, because his mother was literally that bedrock. She was the anchor of his love, right? I mean, he wasn't getting love anywhere else in life except from his mother. And then he finds out what she did to him as a child, and that she is responsible for his mental illness, for that laughing disorder that he has because of the brain damage that she inflicted upon him, or allowed to be inflicted upon him by her boyfriend at the time, whatever, right? So it's very touching stuff, you know. It's uncomfortable, but it's a good kind of uncomfortableness because it provokes discussion, and it's thought-provoking stuff just in general. You know, these are things that we have to think about as a society, as a whole, right? And then again, I said this in the introduction, when he's finally on the show with Robert De Niro, and before I get to that, right, before I get to that, I just want to say, when the Joker kills the guy that gave him the gun and lied about it and told the cops that the Joker brought that gun to work all by himself and he lied about it, when in fact that he gave the gun to the Joker. When the Joker kills that dude, man, that was horrific. And there was mixed feelings I had when I saw that, because I didn't like that guy, man, and I was kind of glad to see him get killed, but just the way it was executed, man, that was brutal. I mean, that scene was directed almost in a documentary style. It felt like that murder was really going down on some Faces of Death stuff right there. That was crazy, right? And just the way the Joker acted, like lost in thought after he killed that dude, and how he was nonchalant about it. And you see, like, he still has compassion for the short dude, right? Because the short dude was the only guy that was ever nice to him at his job. I mean, that whole scene right there was disturbing. As much as I wanted that fat dude to get killed like that, it was disturbing when it finally did, man. The acting there was just wow. It was outstanding, man. So when the Joker finally gets on the show with Robert De Niro, again, I love how he says that he's not a part of the protest, that he doesn't believe in that. I don't believe in anything, right? I love that, right? Because it shows that the Joker has no stake in any of this nonsense, and that society, everybody around him is exploiting him. They're exploiting misfortune. The protesters are exploiting the murder. They're exploiting what Thomas Wayne said. Thomas Wayne kind of bounced off the situation too, to terrible results, right? And then you got the Robert De Niro, the TV show host, exploiting the Joker for being a bad comedian. He's just there for laughs. He's just there at his expense for laughs, right? And it's right. It's like the Joker wants people to be kinder to one another. And when the Joker says that, to me, aside from all this heavy stuff that's going on in this movie, aside from the whole like gloss of this film that this is essentially a Batman and kind of Joker movie, a DC property, a comic book movie, for me, that's the thesis of this film. Even though this film is about a villain, to me, that's the thesis of this film. For people to be kinder to one another. And that right there hits really hard for me. It touches me, touches my heart. And the crazy thing is that out of all people to say this, it's the Joker, right? One of the most diabolical villains in the history of comic books, right? And it's perplexing to have empathy for a villain as twisted and evil as the Joker. But that is what exemplifies this film's brilliance and why I love this movie, right? Now, the protest ultimately ends up contributing to Thomas Wayne's death, right? And I talked about how I didn't like, how I kind of like when Thomas Wayne and his wife Martha get killed, I kind of don't have any empathy, and I don't like that because that's Bruce Wayne's parents, man. That's an important event, and I should have empathy. And you know what? It's because I don't have empathy that I feel that this whole movie was in the Joker's head. I feel like it has to be, man. This can't be how DC wants Thomas Wayne to be depicted, right? This has to be all in the Joker's head, and that's why at the very end he says to the social worker or the doctor in Arkham Asylum, you wouldn't get the joke, right? The whole thing was in his head. And I think the whole point of this film was that thesis, that we have to be kinder to one another. I mean, there's all this like, there's definitely other things to take away, take issues regarding mental illness more serious, etc., etc. But ultimately, for me, the thesis is we need to treat each other kinder, be nicer to one another. And that basically brings us to the end of my review for The Joker, one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. It's outstanding. And even though I had that one little critique in regards to how Thomas Wayne was depicted in this film, I still want to give this film an A+. It's outstanding. This film really resonates with me. It really touches my heart despite it being very disturbing stuff, right? But I feel this film has heart, and I feel this film has a message, a good message for society, right? And even though it can be a challenging watch, you gotta appreciate this is art. This is a comic book movie that is art. It's not a summer blockbuster Disney ride, right? This is to be taken seriously, and I appreciate that because those are the kind of comic book movies that I love. I want them to be artistic. I don't want them to feel like a ride at Disneyland or Universal Studios or Great America. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in art. So that being said, this film is an A+ for me. Thank you guys for listening to my review and analysis of The Joker. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. Last but not least, one love, people. And remember, let's be kinder to one another. Take care. One love.